In the Middle Ages, nobody really wanted to be a food taster. It's not like someone woke up one morning and said, "You know what I'd love? To risk my life for some rich guy's dinner." Nope, this job was more like an unwanted hand-me-down sweater from an older sibling. You got stuck with it, and you had no choice but to wear it. Most food tasters were servants already working in the castle or household. One day you're scrubbing floors, and the next you're being told to eat a suspicious bowl of stew just to be sure it's safe. And if you refuse, well, congratulations. You're now the main course at the king's next creative execution session. And if you think being a food taster came with any sort of training, think again. Your job was simple. Eat the food. And if you don't keel over within 5 minutes, the king digs in. That's it. No manual, no hazard pay, and definitely no health insurance. Now let's talk about what you were eating. In modern times, you might imagine a life filled with lobster bisque and perfectly grilled steaks. However, in the Middle Ages, medieval cuisine was, how do I put this delicately? An assault on both the palate and the digestive system. First off, there was no refrigeration. Meat was either dried, smoked, or left in a vague state of aged, which is a polite way of saying one sniff away from deadly. Vegetables were boiled into unrecognizable mush, and spices were used more to cover up the stench of rot than to enhance flavor. Then there were the experiments. Pies stuffed with everything from birds to eels? Check. Jellies made from questionable animal parts? Absolutely. And don't forget the trend of mixing sweet and savory. Think sugar-dusted chicken legs. Sure, it might not be poison, but it's still a crime against humanity. Sometimes the nobles didn't exactly treat you like royalty when you were sampling their food. Instead of tasting freshly cooked meals, you could be asked to try something that could best be described as, what's the grossest thing we can think of today? There were times when you were called upon to test special foods that were so off the wall. You wondered if they were concocted just to see how far they could push your limits. Think dishes like fermented fish, rotting cheese, or meats that look like they've been cooked in someone's shoe. And what were you supposed to do? Act like you didn't just wish for the sweet release of death the moment it touched your lips. If you were unlucky, you'd be faced with the king's new favorite thing that he swore was delicious and would catch on among the nobles. So now you're stuck choking down something that tastes like a mix of burned hair and regret, all while nodding and saying, "Yes, sire, this is wonderful," like you weren't internally planning your escape from the entire kingdom. Of course, the real reason you existed was poison. The Middle Ages were basically one big episode of Game of Thrones, with everyone trying to one-up each other in the murder department. Kings, queens, dukes, they all had enemies. And what's the easiest way to kill someone without raising suspicion? Slip a little something extra into their supper. Enter the food taster, the human guinea pig of medieval dining. Every bite you took could be your last. Was that tingling sensation on your tongue a sign of arsenic, or just the fact that medieval cooks thought lightly charred meant burnt beyond recognition? Who knows? The worst part was that poisons back then weren't subtle. You weren't just dropping dead in the corner. No, you were probably foaming at the mouth, writhing on the floor, and giving everyone at the table a front row seat to your final moments. Even if the food wasn't poisoned, it could still kill you. Hygiene in the Middle Ages was, let's call it optional. Kitchens were breeding grounds for every disease imaginable. Rats were frequent visitors, and cooks didn't exactly believe in washing their hands, or anything else for that matter. Ever heard of ergot? It's a fun little fungus that grows on grains and causes hallucinations, seizures, and sometimes death. Bread contaminated with ergot was a staple on many medieval tables, and you got first dibs on a side of medieval LSD. And let's not forget about the wine. Medieval wine wasn't the smooth, velvety drink we know today. It was often sour, murky, and spiced with questionable additives to make it somewhat drinkable. Sometimes those additives included lead, because why not? Lead poisoning, the secret ingredient you didn't ask for but definitely got. If you think your current job is unstable, try being a food taster. Your career could literally end with your next meal. If the poison didn't get you, the stress probably would. Every bite was a gamble, every meal a potential death sentence. Imagine sitting down to eat, and instead of savoring the flavors, you're thinking, is this stew gonna kill me? And if you somehow survived long enough to get good at your job, what was your reward? Absolutely nothing. There was no promotion, no raise, no pat on the back. You were a disposable tool, and the minute you became inconvenient or developed a suspicious immunity to poison, you were replaced. Being a food taster didn't exactly make you popular. The king might have kept you close, but not because he liked you. You were a necessity, not a friend. To the other servants, you were just another cog in the machine, and probably a source of morbid curiosity. Hey, is today the day they finally keel over? Place your bets. Outside the castle, it wasn't much better. To the villagers, you were part of the royal entourage, which meant you were just as disliked as the nobles themselves. You didn't have allies, just a front row seat to everyone's disdain. The saddest part of being a medieval food taster is that nobody remembers you. Well, sure, there might be a mention of your role in some dusty old history book, but you're not the star of any grand stories. There are no monuments to your bravery, no ballads sung in your honor, and certainly no statues of you dramatically holding a fork and taking one for the team. Instead, you're just another nameless servant whose sole contribution to history was making sure the soup wasn't poisoned before the king took a bite. Meanwhile, the kings, queens, and noble lords you risked your life for are immortalized in statues, portraits, and glorified accounts of their heroic deeds, whether those deeds were ruling justly or causing a war over a piece of land the size of a garden gnome's backyard. And let's not even talk about your funeral. There's no grand procession, no gathering of mourners praising your sacrifice. Instead, your death is likely brushed off with a, well, he had a good run. Couldn't have been a fun job, though. Your family might get a measly token for your service, if they're lucky, but the royal family won't be sending their condolences, and there certainly won't be a plaque on the wall with your name carved into it. If you're lucky, a passing bard might toss a rhyme or two your way, but it'll likely be something like, a man who ate for kings only to die of terrible things. Not exactly the stuff of legends. So the next time you're complaining about your job, think about the medieval food taster and count your blessings. At least your lunch isn't trying to kill you.